Paris, the winter of 1792. A locksmith works late in the royal storehouse, cataloguing what the revolution has left behind. The crown jewels of France are being inventoried before they can be sold or seized. He lifts a small parcel of tissue paper and unfolds it, and for a moment the candlelight seems to bend. Resting in his palm is a stone the color of deep blue water, larger than a walnut, faceted like something not entirely of this world. He notes it in the ledger. Within days that stone will vanish, and nearly everyone who has ever owned it has met an early or violent end. The stone we now call the Hope Diamond has one of the strangest reputations in the history of precious objects. For more than 2 centuries, people have whispered that it destroys the lives of those who hold it. Some of those stories are documented, some are exaggeration, and a few, when examined closely, are genuinely difficult to explain away. To understand the legend, we have to go back to where the stone actually came from, and to the man who first carried it out of India. His name was Jean-Baptiste Tavernier, and he was one of the most remarkable travelers of the 17th century. He was a French gem merchant, and over the course of his life he crossed the distance between Europe and Asia 6 separate times, on foot, on horseback, and by ship, at an age when most men never left the province of their birth. He dealt in diamonds, pearls, and rubies for the courts of Europe. He knew stones the way a sailor knows the sea. Sometime in the 1660s in India, Tavernier acquired an enormous blue diamond. He described it as a beautiful violet color, and its rough weight was over 115 carats. Where exactly he got it, he did not fully explain. That silence is the first thread the legend would later pull.
The folklore, which grew up long afterward, claims the diamond was pried from the eye of a Hindu idol, and that in stealing it Tavernier drew down the anger of a god. There is no reliable evidence for this. The folklore, which grew up long afterward, claims the diamond was pried from the eye of a Hindu idol, and that in stealing it Tavernier drew down the anger of a god. There is no reliable evidence for this story. It appears nowhere in Tavernier's own detailed accounts of his travels, and he wrote a great deal. The idol tale seems to have been invented centuries later, when the stone already had a fearful name, and people were looking for an origin worthy of it. So we should set it aside as legend. But we should also notice how early people felt the need to explain the diamond's darkness. What is documented is this. Tavernier sold the blue diamond, along with a great many other gems, to King Louis XIV of France in 1668. He was rewarded generously and given a title of nobility. He lived a long life, far longer than most men of his time, dying in his 80s. So the very first victim of the curse, according to the popular story, was not actually a victim at all.
The legend claims Tavernier was torn apart by wild dogs in Russia. The reality is that he died an old, wealthy man. The curse, at its very foundation, is already built on a story that isn't true. And yet the stone itself now entered a royal court, and the royal court is where the pattern people would later point to truly begins. Louis XIV had the stone recut. The rough Indian gem was transformed by the court jeweler into a cleaner, more brilliant blue diamond of about 67 carats, and it became known as the blue diamond of the crown, or more romantically, the French blue. The Sun King wore it set in gold, suspended on a ribbon at his neck for ceremonies. He reigned for 72 years, the longest reign in European history. He too does not fit the picture of a man destroyed by a cursed jewel. But look closer at the court, and the shadows begin to gather. The French blue passed down through the royal family.
It came, in time, into the possession of Louis XVI and his wife, Marie Antoinette. And here the legend finds its most powerful image. The queen who loved jewels. The queen who was said to be careless with a suffering nation's wealth. The queen who went to the guillotine in 1793, her husband beheaded before her. Now we must be careful. Marie Antoinette did not die because of a diamond. She died because of a revolution, because of politics, hunger, war, and the fury of a kingdom that had turned against its monarchy. To blame a stone is to ignore history. But the storytellers who built the curse were not interested in that distinction. They saw a queen who had worn the blue diamond, and they saw her head fall into a basket, and they connected the two. And it was precisely during this collapse of the monarchy that the diamond disappeared. Return to that royal storehouse in Paris in September of 1792. The monarchy had fallen. The crown jewels had been placed under government control. Over the course of several nights, thieves broke into the storehouse and looted it. The robbery went on for days before anyone stopped it. When the inventory was finally checked, the great French blue was gone. For the next 20 years, the stone vanished from the historical record completely. And this is where the diamond does something genuinely strange. It disappears as one shape and reappears as another. In 1812, in London, a blue diamond surfaced. It was smaller than the French blue, around 45 carats, recut, presumably to disguise its origin. Modern analysis, using a lead model of the original French stone discovered in a museum collection, has confirmed what historians long suspected. The London diamond was cut from the stolen French blue. Someone had taken the crown jewel of France, smuggled it across the channel, and sliced it down into a new gem so that it could never be traced. The date of that first documented reappearance is almost exactly 20 years after the theft, which happens to be the point at which the statute of limitations on the crime would have expired. Someone had waited, someone had planned. The recut stone eventually came into the hands of a wealthy London banking family, the Hope family, and it is from them that the diamond takes the name it carries today. Not from hope in the human sense, from a surname, but that coincidence of language would help the legend enormously in the years to come. Now the stone was in England, its royal past hidden, its blood-soaked reputation not yet fully formed, and for a time, the Hope family kept it quietly. Here is where we must be honest about how legends are made. Many of the deaths attached to the Hope diamond in later years cannot be verified. As the stone became famous, particularly in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, sellers and newspapers attached to it a long list of ruined owners, most of whom either never existed or never owned the diamond at all. There are stories of a Russian prince who gave it to a dancer and then shot her. Stories of a Greek merchant who fell off a cliff. Stories of a Turkish sultan whose empire crumbled. When historians go looking for these people, they often find nothing. No records, no names that hold up. The curse, in other words, was partly a marketing invention, a way to make a dark and glamorous object even more desirable. But not every story dissolves under examination. And the closer the diamond comes to our own time, the harder some of the deaths become to dismiss. Because in 1911, the Hope diamond crossed the Atlantic and came to America. And it came into the life of a woman whose fate is documented in detail. Her name was Evelyn Walsh McLean. She was the daughter of a man who had struck it rich in the gold mines of Colorado, and she had grown up poor before growing up impossibly wealthy. She was bright, restless, and drawn to beautiful things. She purchased the Hope diamond from the jeweler Pierre Cartier, and by her own account, Cartier told her all about the stone's terrible reputation, the deaths, the ruin, the curse. Evelyn did not run from it. She found it thrilling. She believed, or told herself she believed, that objects unlucky for others might be lucky for her. She had a priest bless the stone. Then she wore it constantly. She hung it around the neck of her dog. She let her children play with it. She hid it around her estate during parties and made guests hunt for it. She treated the most feared diamond in the world like a toy. Here is the part that makes people uneasy. Evelyn Walsh McLean lived a life that fell apart piece by piece in ways she could not stop. Her beloved son, her first child, died at the age of 9, struck by a car near the family home. Her marriage collapsed as her husband descended into alcoholism and was eventually declared insane, dying in a sanatorium. The family newspaper, The Great Inheritance, went bankrupt, and in 1946, her only daughter died of an overdose in her 20s. Evelyn herself died the following year. Her fortune diminished, her family shattered. Now, again, we must hold two things at once. Grief and tragedy visit the rich as surely as the poor. A car accident, an addiction, a mental illness, a failing business. Each of these has a real and human cause that owes nothing to a stone. If you assembled the biography of almost any long-lived person, you would find loss threaded through it. The diamond did not steer that automobile. The diamond did not pour those drinks. And yet, when you lay Evelyn's life beside the legend that Cartier had recited to her before she bought the stone, the pattern is uncomfortable. She was warned, she laughed, and then, one by one, the people she loved were taken from her. Evelyn understood exactly what people said about her. In her later years, she was aware that the world watched her tragedies and nodded, as if the curse were doing its work. She refused to sell the diamond, even as her fortune shrank. It stayed with her until she died. Whatever the stone was, she would not let it go, and it did not let go of her. After her death, her jewels were sold to pay her debts, and the Hope diamond passed to one of the most famous jewelers in America, Harry Winston. And it is Harry Winston who brings the story to its final, quietly astonishing chapter. Winston owned the diamond for years. He exhibited it. He displayed it at charity events across the country, letting ordinary Americans see the stone that kings had worn and that had supposedly destroyed everyone who touched it. And then, in 1958, he decided to give it away. Not to a person, to a nation. He donated the Hope diamond to the Smithsonian Institution in Washington so that it would belong to the public forever. And this is where a genuinely eerie documented fact enters the record. Harry Winston did not deliver the priceless diamond by armored convoy. He sent it through the mail. He wrapped the most notorious jewel in the world in brown paper and posted it as registered mail, insured, but essentially just a package. The postage cost a little over $2. The wrapping and insurance brought it to around $145. And the man who carried that package on his mail route, the postman who delivered the Hope diamond to the Smithsonian, was named James Todd. What happened to James Todd afterward is the detail that lingers. Shortly after he delivered the diamond, his leg was crushed in a truck accident. Not long after that, he suffered a head injury in another accident. His wife died, his dog died, and his house caught fire. When reporters asked him whether he believed the Hope diamond had cursed him, he is said to have answered with the dry humor of a man who has decided not to be afraid. He supposedly said that if the hard luck was coming from the diamond, then it was doing a poor job because he was still here. Now we should treat even this with the caution the whole legend demands. Some of the misfortunes attributed to the mailman have been exaggerated in the retelling, and the timeline is not always clean. But the core is real. A man delivered the diamond, and a run of bad luck followed him, and the coincidence was strong enough that it became part of the official story the Smithsonian itself tells about the stone. And here, at last, the curse does something it had never done before. It stops. Since the Hope diamond entered the Smithsonian in 1958, it has sat behind glass, seen by tens of millions of visitors, and nothing has happened. No owner has died because it has no owner. No family has been ruined because it belongs to everyone and no one. The moment the diamond ceased to be possessed, the deaths ceased. Whether that is because the curse required ownership, or because there was never any curse at all, and only the natural misfortunes of individual lives, is a question the stone will not answer. So what are we actually left with when we separate the documented from the invented? We can dismiss the origin myth entirely. There is no evidence the diamond was torn from an idol, and the man who brought it out of India died old and rich. We can set aside most of the 19th century deaths, the princes and sultans and dancers, because when examined, they mostly evaporate. They were the work of jewelers and journalists who understood that a dangerous diamond sells for more than a beautiful one. The curse, in large part, was a story deliberately built to increase the value of a stone. But two things resist that explanation. The first is the diamond's uncanny journey through the French Revolution. Worn by a king who reigned for 72 years, then by a queen who was beheaded, then stolen during the collapse of a monarchy, then hidden for exactly the length of time needed to escape the law, then recut so it could never be traced. That is not a curse. That is history, crime, and human calculation. But it reads like a curse, and that is why the legend found such fertile ground. The second is Evelyn Walsh McLean. Because her story is not folklore, it is documented, dated, and real. A woman was warned that the stone destroyed the people around its owner. She kept it anyway, and then she lost her son, her daughter, her husband, and her fortune. Every rational person knows that a car accident and an addiction and a bankruptcy are not caused by a diamond. And still, when you read her life beside the warning she was given, something in you resists the tidy explanation. That is the true power of the Hope diamond, not that it kills, but that it makes us doubt our own certainty. It is a stone that has passed through the hands of kings and thieves and grieving mothers, and every one of them left a story darker than the last, until the object itself seemed to be keeping score. The diamond is still there, in Washington, behind its glass. Deep blue,
glowing faintly under the lights, larger than a walnut, exactly as it was in that candlelit storehouse in 1792. Millions of people press close to look at it every year, and when they do, they think of the queen who wore it and lost her head, and the mother who wore it and lost her children. Then they read the small card beside it, and they learn that the stone was once mailed across the country in brown paper, for the price of a few dollars, by a man whose luck ran out the moment he touched the package. He said the diamond was doing a poor job of cursing him. His house burned down anyway,